What's up, Green Bay Packers fans? Welcome back, and as always, thank you for joining me. My name's Paul Bretto. Today, we're here to discuss one Green Bay defender who has really capitalized on his opportunities, making some high-impact plays since the bye week. But first, before we dive in, you know what to do. Hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel. I do greatly appreciate it. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Bretto. Find all my work, including the article version of what we're discussing here today over at ESPNlacrosse.com. And for my Wisconsin sports radio fans, Packers, Brewers, Bucks, Badgers, whatever you need every day of the week, download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app. You can find me on Sports Lead, Monday through Friday, 3 to 6, multiple days per week. So like I said, we're going to be discussing one defender, and there's certainly several others on this Packers defense who are making the most of their opportunities since the bye week. And that player, defensive end, Brenton Cox. Following the Preston Smith trade, which occurred just before the trade deadline, leading into the Packers' bye week in Week 10, Cox has taken on a much, much larger role. He's gone from being inactive on Sundays, a healthy scratch each of the first 9 games of the season, to all of a sudden, since the bye week, Week 11 through Week 16, where we are now, he's playing on average 22 snaps per game, and this included a career high of 26 snaps this past Sunday against the New Orleans Saints. He is, just like that, become a crucial, vital member of the Green Bay Packers defensive end rotation week in and week out, and he's capitalizing again on those snaps that he's getting. Since Week 11, he's generated 13 pressures and, by Pro Football Focus metrics, 4 sacks. Now, those numbers on their own, when we look in the grand scheme of the edge rusher position around the NFL, he's not going to be in the top 10 or even the top 20 in terms of pressures or sacks. And again, a lot of that's just a product of playing 22 snaps per game, which, again, compared to many other edge rushers out there, more of the higher end players at that position, they're playing a lot more in 22 snaps. So that's not necessarily an accurate representation of how impactful Brenton Cox has been relative to the rest of his position group. But what is a good representation is the efficiency at which he's generating that type of production based on his snap count. So there's 2 metrics that Pro Football Focus utilizes to help level the playing field in that regard, right? Taking out of the equation the number of snaps that a player plays. One is their pass rush win rate, which, as it sounds, how often are you beating the offensive lineman across from you? In pass rush win rate since Week 11, Brenton Cox ranks 15th among all defensive ends in football. Pro Football Focus has another metric. If win rate is how often you're winning, pass rush productivity is how often are you turning those wins into production, pressures or sacks. So the pass rush productivity metric is it's relative to the number of snaps that you've had, and it is weighted a bit more heavily towards sacks. So out of all defensive ends, edge rushers, whatever terminology you want to use, Brenton Cox since Week 11 ranks 5th in that category, again, generating 13 pressures and 4 sacks on an average of 22 snaps per game. With the playing time he's had, as these numbers show, he's been incredibly, incredibly efficient. And while from the outside, right, the outside world, the outside perspective, to a degree, I imagine, for just about everyone, this type of production level of play is coming out of nowhere, right? Because, like I said, Brenton Cox had been a healthy scratch every week up until Week 11 this season. Last season, I think he made 3 appearances, played like 5 defensive snaps. We saw what Brenton Cox did in college on the football field. We knew he had the ability to get after the quarterback, but a lot of that, again, from the outside perspective, was just potential, because outside of some preseason games, if you attended training camp practices, what you heard from training camp practices from us in attendance, that was really the snippet of Brenton Cox that we had gotten up to this point. But now, again, that ability that he has to get after the quarterback is on full display. But internally, inside the Packers building, they're not surprised whatsoever. I mean, I asked Jason Rebrovich a few weeks ago about Brenton Cox's play since coming into a larger goal, and he just started off by going, doesn't surprise me whatsoever. They've seen him do this consistently now for coming up on 2 years that he's been with the team on the practice field. They've seen him be on the scout team defense, wrecking plays for the Green Bay Packers starting offense, again, just because of the ability that he has to get after the Packers. And J.J. Nigbari echoed similar sentiments. He goes, not surprised at all. I've been seeing this from him in the meeting rooms, on the practice field for almost 2 years now. This is what I see on a daily basis. So again, internally, Packers, not surprised whatsoever. And you obviously got the feeling that they had, that strong sense that Brenton Cox was ready for a much, much larger role when they, of course, made that Preston Smith trade. Now, Preston Smith, the reports that he requested the trade, wanting to go back to a 3-4 defensive scheme versus the Packers' new 4-3 system under Jeff Hafley. And so, again, that's part of the equation, but you have to think, especially for a pass rush unit that had not been generating consistent pressure through the first half of the season, if the Packers didn't feel confident in the depth that they had behind Preston Smith, that's probably not a deal that they make, right? But they saw what Brenton Cox was doing over and over and over again in practice. I remember when that trade was made and it became known that Brenton Cox is going to step into a much larger role. I mean, Jeff Hafley was talking about just going back and watching the film at practice, and there just being some, again, wow plays from Brenton Smith against the Packers starting offense. So internally, I don't think the Packers whatsoever are surprised by Brenton Cox's play, by his production. Again, they've seen it on a consistent, regular basis for coming up on 2 years now. And from a skill set standpoint, Brenton Cox, very, very good athlete. But where he's at his best right now, he wins with power. There is still a rep from training camp that's still, again, I can hear it as I'm talking through it. It was early on, the full pads weren't on. They were just wearing their shells, the shoulder pads. And again, he was working primarily with the third team defense, some reps with the second. So on this rep, I think he was going up against either Caleb Jones, Kadeem Telfort, but off the snap, just the force, the violent hands that Brenton Cox hit the offensive tackle shoulder pads with, that pop. Like I said, I can still hear it. And it, of course, knocked the offensive tackle on his heels. Brenton Cox got to the quarterback for what would likely have been a sack. So that was one play, right? And of course, he has more to his pass rush repertoire, right? He's a good athlete. He can win with speed. But when it comes to what's his bread and butter, what does he do really, really well? It's power. It's violent hands. It's his strength. And that one play, again, it's one play. But to me, that encapsulates what Brenton Cox brings to the Green Bay Packers defense and where the strength of his pass rush abilities lie. Now, he was a 2023 undrafted rookie out of Florida. And like I said, he always had the ability to pressure the quarterback. That was always been a strength of his. But last season, rookie year, undrafted, and it was a crowded room, right? Similarly to this year, because it was a crowded room, we didn't see Brenton Cox until week 11, and it took a trade of Preston Smith to get there. So combination of a crowded room in 2023, being a rookie, needing development, led to him not seeing much playing time, right? He was on the roster because you don't want to risk that caliber of player being on the practice squad and being signed away by another team. So the Packers rostered him, but he was a healthy scratch. Like I said, I think he appeared in 3 games last year, played 5 defensive snaps. But what we're seeing right now as well is a year 2 leap. And that's a phrase that we throw around a lot, right? Around the NFL when discussing the progression of players. That year 2 jump it's a jump that a lot of successful NFL players make. For one, you've had a full off season to train, right? Because when you're going from college to the NFL, it's the draft process. You're doing workouts, you're training for, right? You're working on your 40 time, your vertical jump, doing interviews, maybe more so than the actual pass rush reps in this example, right? Your technique to your skill position, because you're trying to maximize your draft stock by performing well in the NFL combine events that they have. So that full off season just to hone in, work on your craft, really, really important to that jump. The other part, you've got a year of experience under your belt in going through the day-to-day of what it takes to be a professional in the NFL. That's from watching how to watch film, taking care of your body so you're healthy at your best on the field as often as you can be. There's adjusting to the play speed that comes with the NFL. And all of that put together just gives you an overall comfort in what you're being asked to do. And even with the Packers transitioning to a new defense, because that can be another layer to this year 2 leap, right? Year 2 in the same system, a better understanding, confidence in what you're being asked to do. And the Packers didn't have that, or at least the Packers rookies from 2023 didn't on defense, moving from Joe Barry's defense to Jeff Hafley's. But the Jeff Hafley system fits what Brenton Cox does well, I think, to a T. This Jeff Hafley defense is it's an attacking front, as Jason Rebovich said over the summer. It's about getting off the ball, getting north and south and getting to the quarterback as quickly as possible. Whereas Joe Barry's 3-4 scheme, it's more of a read and react, right? You're trying to read what the offensive line's doing, what the running back, what the quarterback's doing, and then you're adjusting your gaps that you're defending, how you're rushing the quarterback, you're adjusting to what the offense is doing versus, like I said, in this system, get off the ball, go get the quarterback. And again, Brenton Cox, pass rush ability, that's where he thrives, getting after the quarterback. So I think this is a really, really good fit for him. And again, with this production that we're seeing, this growth, this jump that he's made in the second season, I think we're seeing the product or the results of that on the field on Sundays. Like I said, he's making a big, big impact. And again, Brenton Cox is standing out. He's capitalizing on the opportunities that he has. But really, this Packers pass rush, the defensive front as a whole, has really been picking up steam as well. Against New Orleans last week, Spencer Rattler was under pressure on 53% of his dropbacks. That was the third highest mark in week 16. Against Seattle the week before, Sam Howell, Geno Smith at quarterback for the Seahawks, both of them were ranked top 10 in pressure rate on them. Again, in week 15, Tua, when the Packers played the Dolphins, had the 6th most dropbacks under pressure. Brandon Allen with the 49ers when Green Bay played San Francisco had the 12th highest pressure rate in that game. So we're steadily seeing, again, it's not just Brenton Cox, but a lot of these Packers pass rushers are coming along. Enagbari continues to flash a lot more consistently. Rashawn Gary, I think it's flying under the radar right now. And I hope to write something about him later in the week because he's playing some really, really good football right now. And I know pressures and sacks are what garner the attention. It's what we're talking about here mostly today. But Rashawn Gary, as a run defender this season, has been really, really good as well. You're seeing Carl Brooks. I put this out on Twitter, I think, during the Seattle game. Feels like there's a pass rush rep or two where each week where you just go, wow, where Carl Brooks is really flashing. Devontae Wyatt's coming on. Kenny Clark is healthy. We're seeing a typical December Kenny Clark making his impact. So we're seeing a lot of, and that's the exciting part, and why I think this can be sustainable, and this just isn't a flash in the pan for the pass rushes. Because how many guys did I just list off? A handful, and I'm sure I'm missing some as well that are coming on that seem to be peaking at the right time. So I think that's a big reason why what we're seeing from this group can be sustainable. And we talked about it a lot during the first half of the season. I alluded to it earlier. The Packers weren't getting that steady pass rush production from their front four during the first half of the season. And a lot of the pressures that they did generate, success that they did have, was crafted by Jeff Hafley with design pressures, simulated pressures, blitzes, whatever it might have been. But I just want to point this out as well. This, of course, you still want to see your players, of course, win their one-on-one matchups more often than they aren't. And I think during the first half of the season, again, we weren't seeing that consistently. But when you're playing a 4-3, I think we at least have to be mindful because the context, all this matters. When you're playing a 4-3 defense like the Packers do, there's a numbers disadvantage for your defensive front. When you're in a 3-4, you have your 3 down linemen, you have your 2 outside linebackers who are essentially pass rushers. So it's 5-on-5, 5 rushers, 5 blockers. 4-3, it's 4 rushers versus 5 blockers. Today's NFL, Matt LaFleur talked about this quite a bit. With the athleticism at the tight end position, you see a lot of teams keeping their tight ends in to chip initially before leaking out into a flat or crossing over the middle as a pass catching option for the offense. So now when teams do that, well, now it's 6 versus 4. If teams keep the running back in to help as well, now it's potentially 7 versus 4 at some point. And again, when you're passing off blockers and you have that advantage, there might not be many plays throughout the course of a game where one of your pass rushers isn't touch, chip, block, whatever it might be, by multiple defenders blockers, within a given play. So again, I think that context again is important. But at the end of the day, you want to see your team winning their one-on-one matchups more often than they're not. And I think that's an area now, as we're starting to see the 4-man front generate more success, where we're seeing the Packers be more effective and have more consistency. And I think a few products of that are, one, the comfort in the scheme. Again, this is a brand new defensive scheme. It takes time to implement. I know the moniker of Jeff Hafley's defense coming in is that it's going to be a more simplified version, right, of what he's asking the defenders to do, but this is still a brand new scheme, brand new responsibilities, how your responsibility works within the scope of the defense among the 10 other defenders on the field for you. And then the offense is throwing different looks that you now have to respond to while playing a different defensive scheme, having new responsibilities. Again, there's millions of variables, or tons of variables, I should say, in play with all this, and it takes time to get acclimated and to find that consistency. But I think the Packers are finding that. And when you have that consistency, what do you get? You get fast, physical, confident. And oftentimes when you have those three elements together, you get impactful play. And I think that's what we're seeing from the pass rush. And I think another component as well, complementary football. The Packers offense done a great job over the last month of jumping out to quick, early, multi-score leads. So from the defensive perspective, what does that do? Well, the offense that you're now up against, they get out of their game plan a little bit, right? They're down by multiple scores. They have to play catch up. They get a little bit more pass heavy, a little bit more one-dimensional. Now for the pass rush, not as worried about the run game. So what are you doing? You're pinning your ears back. You're going and get the quarterback. So, and there's a lot of factors in play here, but I think we're seeing better execution from that Packers defensive front. And last thing I'll say here before we wrap this up, and I'm sure I've said this on here before, but the Packers' ceiling defensively this season is going to be determined by how good, how consistent their pass rush is. Again, we know what sacks do, right? Sacks put teams behind the sticks, long down and distance situations, gives the defense the advantage both in coverage from a pass rush, but even pressures. That disrupts the timing, the rhythm of the play. When the quarterback is under steady pressure, every single player on that defense benefits from it. Specifically the secondary, right? When things are sped up, one, there's not nearly the defenders in the secondary don't have to be in coverage as long. Obviously, that's advantageous. When the timing, the rhythm, the disruption, you get the quarterback on the move out of the pocket, when all that starts to unfold, the mechanics can deteriorate, can lead to accuracy issues, can lead to mistakes, again, for the defense to capitalize on. It's not, again, I always want to preface, there's always so many factors in play versus the one or two things we may talk about with a certain topic, but I don't believe it's a coincidence either that as the Packers navigate injuries in the secondary, right? No Jair Alexander for a few weeks, Bullard's been out for a few weeks, Evan Williams just missed a game. I don't think it's a coincidence that this Packers secondary, even with those injuries, is holding its own right now, at the same time that the pass rush also happens to be generating more consistent pressure. Pass rush is helping that Packers secondary out as they navigate these injuries. So, like I said, the Packers' ceiling defensively is going to be determined by how effective their pass rush is and how consistent it is. As always, I appreciate you tuning in. If you made it this far in the video, you might as well hit like, you might as well hit subscribe on the channel, leave a comment, let me know your thoughts. I do greatly appreciate you tuning in. You can follow me on Twitter at Paul_Brettel, find all my work over at ESPNLacrosse.com, and download the 105.5 ESPN Lacrosse app for all your Wisconsin sports radio needs. So until next time, friends, take care.